On this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
Welcome to this episode of Life Science Success. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I'm a digital marketer in life sciences. And as we get started here with this episode of Life Science Success, I have just a quick message from our sponsor.
This episode of Life Science Success is brought to you by D3 Digital Media Marketing. Dive into the digital world with confidence and creativity on your side. D3 Digital Media Marketing is your all-in-one solution for making a lasting impact online. From the vibrant, engaging world of social media marketing, podcasts, and webinars to the strategic depths of website development, SEO, pay-per-click, email, and content marketing, we tailor our approach to fit your unique brand story. Let's elevate your presence, connect with your audience, and drive success together. Your digital journey starts here. Visit d3digitalmedia.com to learn more.
And so with that, our guest today on the Life Science Success podcast is Tushar Pandey. He's a distinguished expert in the life sciences industry, currently making significant strides at Symbiosys. With his innovative approach to healthcare and technology, his contributions have been pivotal in advancing medical solutions and improving patient outcomes. So with that, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Don. Distinguished is a little bit of an overstatement, but I appreciate it.
Hey, I mean, I see, some great things that we're going to talk about today. And I feel like, that happens, as a part of, leadership and focus and, getting a lot of stuff done all at once. And so distinguished to me sort of, that word resonates, at least with me. So I still hold that title for you. So can you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Absolutely. I don't know how far back you want to go, but happy to. Tushar Pandey, CEO, co-founder here at Symbiosys. Symbiosys is an early stage startup focused on precision cancer care and really redefining the precision medicine space in this area. My background, I'll go all the way back. Indian by origin, grew up in Africa in a little country called Uganda, and then moved here to the States for my education, right? So the way I describe myself, I'm Indian by origin, African at heart, now American by nationality. New in some ways to the life science space, but have been in healthcare my entire career.
Well, I got to know as well. I mean, for those of you who can see the video version of this, I know that for the audio version people, they won't get to see this, but what's the stadium behind your head?
So it is a stadium called Old Trafford. So if you grew up in Africa, you pick one of two English soccer teams, pardon me, Manchester United or Arsenal. And growing up, I was a big diehard Manchester United fan.
Very nice.
And so there's a double meaning here. We refer to the office here at Symbiosys as the Theater of Dreams, which is what Old Trafford, Manchester United is also called. So I get to have it both ways.
Yeah, I know some Man U fans. I just haven't paid enough attention to the stadium before to know that that's the case. As a matter of fact, whenever I used to travel quite a bit, and anytime that I was in or near London, I tried to make sure that I paid attention to who was playing football at that point in time. So yeah, right.
Got it.
All right, very good. And so could you tell me a little bit as well about what initially drew you to the life sciences field? And I mean, it seems to me like your career has really evolved over the years. So would love to hear more about your story.
Absolutely. So I from Uganda, I had this knack and desire to learn engineering. Most brown kids do, right? That's a stereotype that I could say you can. But I wanted to be an engineer, and I wanted to be an electrical engineer. Was not smart enough to get into MIT, So got a nice rejection letter from MIT, and so picked the second best school at that time, which was University of Illinois. So people ask me how you end up from Uganda in East Africa to Champaign, Illinois. Um, Nowhere all the time, but that was the purpose. I wanted to learn engineering, go to the best school that I could, and had a wonderful experience in Champaign. Became an engineer, fell in love with silicon fabrication, so building chips on the Nvidias of this world, the Intels of this world back in the day. They weren't as advanced as they are today, but really enjoyed that. What I realized as I was about to graduate is I like people, and when you're in a silicon fabrication lab, you got to be suited up. You can't speak to anybody. You can't communicate well. So I realized that's probably not the right industry for me. But I picked healthcare as the industry that I fell in love with. Right, my mother was a doctor in Uganda. She was one of the few gynecologists in Uganda and started the cervical screening program in Africa. So when she started that, you'd see this. If you look up the cervical cancer data in East Africa, you see this crazy uptick of cancer rising there just because people were screening. So new healthcare was close to my heart in a lot of ways, and wanted to understand healthcare data a little bit better, having an engineering orientation. So joined what was back then a small mom and pop shop called Strata Decision Technology. It's about 25 to 30 people when I started, based out of Chicago. And the orientation of the company was, how do you optimize capital budgets for health systems and providers, right? And so we have $100 million. How do you optimize that where the need is? So really cool program, but not the most exciting thing to be doing, right? You come out of college and you're kind of in this space. Luckily, we had the opportunity at Strata to build a solution of back then what we thought would be the biggest socioeconomic problem of our lifetime, which is how do you bend the cost curve in the United States, right? Healthcare is great here, but it's incredibly expensive relative to the rest of the world. So got the opportunity to build a brand new solution focused on bringing clinical and financial data together, and then helping providers, doctors, health systems understand what it truly costs them to provide care and what the opportunities were to be able to lower the cost of care within their system and ultimately at a macro level. Sometimes this is the second time in my career I feel like I'm in the right place at the right time. That's truly the right place at the right time. In the early 2010s, the big article came out in the Times Magazine that was around the bitter pill of healthcare, U.S. healthcare costs. And every CFO in the country wanted a new cost accounting system, and we had the best in class. So, got to work with over 500 health systems, deploying the product to those organizations. Led the implementation for that product. The product was best in class, which is Oscars for healthcare IT. If you follow that, now 13 years in a row, and was living the dream. Right, the company grew from 30 people when I started to 500-600 people. Very, very rapidly. So lived the dream, built my family away from my family, and was having a great time, learning a ton. In 2018, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. Right, and this is life science is an incredibly personal area for a lot of us.
Yeah.
And what the realization for me was, when cancer hits your family, the thought of costs go out the window. It doesn't matter. It's what do you do? What's best for what's best for your family member, best for your friend. And in that case, what my calling was is how do we eliminate the uncertainty that exists, especially in cancer. That's what I couldn't get comfortable. I knew enough clinically to be dangerous. I knew what test to order, having worked with the likes of MD Anderson's and John Hopkins and the other big cancer institutes in my past life. What I didn't appreciate is at every point in that cancer journey, cancer professionals, patients are dealing with so much uncertainty despite the amount of data that exists. And really recognize that was my next calling, and that was my entryway into the life science space. Now, the initial asterisk that I gave you, I was not smart enough, so I couldn't do this alone. So I had to find people around me that were smart enough to take my crazy ideas and see if we could put them into reality. So I met two of my co-founders, both alumni out of University of Illinois, one a PhD in physics, Dr. John Cole, one a PhD in chemistry, Dr. Joseph Peterson, who had done some phenomenal work in this space, and really with a focus on how do you understand cancer computationally? And this before the big AI buzz that was starting to happen, and really translate that into solutions that have a big impact on patients, providers, ultimately both a clinical impact as well as an economic impact. So excited to tell you more about it today as we chat.
Yeah, I find that this idea of helping to guide is one of the, one of the main things. I mean, having worked in a hospital very close to, the oncology area, this idea of, figuring out what is the best treatment, what is the best path is something that goes back decades and decades. I mean, all the way back to tumor boards and essentially having reviews of cases and, bright minds essentially sitting in a room saying, well, hey, this drug may have run through its path, but I've had success here. That now maybe, take it this other direction. And some drug companies have even tried doing it. I mean, I know I was a part of one drug company where they were talking about this exact thing, like, let's do it for, kind of across the board, which would be interesting, right? I mean, okay, so what if a competitor's drug like outranks yours? Is that one that you're going to recommend and do the right thing, or does your tool kind of guide people purposefully to your treatments? Not saying that was what was going to happen, but I do feel like there's a real opportunity that's out there to help sort of point the way.
And I'll add a little bit more to it, right? Our view of cancer treatment is a little bit myopic. If you kind of look up precision medicine as a definition today, right? It's not a holistic view, because precision medicine is the simplest definition is I'm going to find this one gene-based target, I'm going to match a patient to that drug, and I'm going to give that patient at the right time. Now, that's partially true, but if you think about a cancer care journey, it's much broader than that one decision. It's how do you precisely diagnose? How do you precisely remove that from a patient's body? When do you give treatment to a patient? What's the set of treatment and what's the intensity of the treatment that you give? What combination? And now the drug development world, rightfully so, is focused on what dose that is optimal for that particular patient. That's the set of decisions that need to be made, right? And those are incredibly complex to make with a singular diagnostic. The tools that we have today don't really answer those type of questions in a cohesive manner. And that's the opportunity we found ourselves at Symbiosys, is to be able to create the most comprehensive precision medicine platform that connects that patient journey and the needs of a provider all together in an incredibly precise manner, using digital data, standard of care information, so that you can do things at scale globally.
Yeah, so I mean that's a great point to dive a little bit deeper into Symbiosys itself. So what's it all about, and what is the company's mission?
Yeah, the company's mission is exactly what I said. It's how do we redefine precision medicine to truly transform patient care and improve outcomes there, right? And our redefinition of precision medicine is exactly that breadth that I was talking about. Is how do you eliminate uncertainty across that workflow as soon as a patient is diagnosed? Right. So there's two components of the thesis for us. One is scientific in nature, and if you ask any researcher what the challenge in cancer is what they'll tell you is cancers are pretty heterogeneous, right? They're unique on a patient by patient basis, and we don't have a great way to understand and comprehend that heterogeneity because solid tumors specifically, which is our focus, are three-dimensional in nature. They're inside your body. They're three-dimensional in nature. The best way we've come up with so far to understand them is let's take a biopsy, right? And it's a very, very small component of a patient's cancer, sometimes 0.01% of the cancer itself, right? And let's go deeper and deeper into that biopsy, right? Let's look it under the let's stain it, let's look it under the microscope, let's go genomically analyze it, proteomically analyze it, metabolomically analyze it, look at single cells, and we'll find something. It's been incredibly valuable from a research and drug development perspective, but if you zoom out, you've perpetuated the problem that you started with, which is this was a heterogeneous disease, right? You can't sequence the tumor in three-dimensional. It's just impossible, at least with what we have today. But you can model the behavior of cancer with what's been understood already scientifically and what's been studied well, right?
Yeah.
So that's the scientific thesis. The other is just having my upbringing being in Africa, it's hard to scale diagnostics globally for a couple of reasons. One, the same technologies, the approaches, the cost, bringing a diagnostic to market is incredibly expensive, right? And that's why you see companies, rightfully so, focus on one vertical, and they always go after the most valuable, which is where you were going, which is how do I help the patient select the right treatment? Because that's where most of the dollars are, right?
Yeah.
And you focus based on the addressable market. That's where everybody goes. But the other part of the thesis is how do you change that paradigm of scale? How do you change the paradigm of and the stereotype that diagnostics have to be so expensive to bring to market. Well, you got to have a couple of orientations. One's a digital orientation, which is
Right.
what can you do just digitally? And with AI blowing up, that opens up that door quite easily, right? You take data, digital data, create models, and then drive this decision making. And the other is how do you fit into a clinical workflow in a manner that's not disruptive, right? Which is how do you produce information that is in the workflow in the moment rather than relying on weeks and weeks at an end to get an answer that you need to a particular question. So in order to solve both of those, both the scientific and the, what I say, emotional thesis, at least for me, right? How do you have a technology that runs across the world that would run right here? We had to create a truly digital software-based solution. And so the solution it relies on standard of care data. So it takes a patient's core image, which gives us the three-dimensionality of cancer, creates a virtual model of that patient's tumor and patient's disease. And then proprietary modeling approaches allow us to generate data that is able to inform decision-making across the workflow. So let's take our first indication, for example, early stage breast cancer.
Okay.
About the US, about 320,000 patients every year. All 320,000 women are having the first conversation they're having after they're diagnosed is, do I need a mastectomy? Do I need breast conservation? Right? Neither of them is the wrong answer for them, but one is a more optimal answer for them. And, we don't think of precision medicine as we treat precision surgery very different from precision medicine. Well, the surgical plan is a core component of that precision medicine because it's going to drive a lot of the downstream decisions. So the first solution we got FDA cleared and launched was Tumor-Site Viz and Plan that is able to kind of capture key information from a patient's image, capture that three-dimensionality, that heterogeneity, and is able to guide a surgeon and a patient in that big decision that they have to make up front. And so that becomes kind of the entry point because the surgeon's the quarterback, and then we launch diagnostics on top that are able to refine that decision making. So the next decision that gets made is, when do you give the treatment that you want to give the patient? Do you give it before surgery, after surgery, neoadjuvant or adjuvant? Most solid tumors are moving into that realm where that decision is becoming important because there's differences in outcomes, there's opportunities that opens up, but it is trial and error. Let's give you treatment, let's see what happens, right? So how can you eliminate that? It's the same way you and I eliminate uncertainty in our lives. Or if you want to go to the closest Starbucks, you don't just start walking. You put it in Google Maps, and you know exactly how long it's going to take you to walk or drive there to pick it up, with very little imprecision, right? You know, plus or minus 2-3 minutes how long it's going to take you. How do we create that type of approach for our clinicians today to be able to empower them with really in the moment information?
Yeah.
So hopefully that gives you a context of kind of what we're building out.
It does. I mean, I guess let's talk a little bit about the boundaries of what you do and don't do. So, are you developing drugs today? Let's start there because I think it's easiest.
That is not our focus at all.
Okay.
But I will say we are supporting and partnering with a number of drug developers in that exact realm, right? It's in a couple of realms, actually. One, if you've been following the Project Optimus initiative that the FDA has launched, there is a change in mindset that needs to happen around dosing. It used to be about maximal tolerable dose. And let's give the patient as much as they can handle, because that will increase the likelihood of success in terms of the response. Well, a mindset's changing very much. It's moving to minimally efficacious dose. So how do you figure out what to give a patient, what dose to give a patient without having given it, right?
Right.
And so the approach that we've created with the platform is, hey, if you have a virtual tumor and a virtual cancer that's a replica of that patient, you can model different dosing regimens,
right,
and be able to figure out where to understand the dosing regimen, where the optimal dosing regimen is for that patient.
Right.
So that's how we're supporting drug developers.
No, I think that's important because I mean, I've certainly worked with companies before, that have done something exactly the same, right? I mean, they had diagnostics that they offered, and essentially it put us, directly in line with offering some answers, for drug developers. Now, on the other side, so let's talk a little bit about the hardware for diagnostics. Do you do any of that? Do you develop any hardware for diagnostics? Okay.
That's excellent question. Going back to how do you do this at scale? That's the digital orientation of the company in its entirety.
Right. And then you mentioned multi-omics. So I'm almost like envisioning like you cut across lots of different platforms, looking at the data and analyzing it for a better answer.
We absolutely do, right? The the data that's being generated now is incredibly valuable. The gap that we have is the connectivity across the scales. So, imaging, three-dimensional, right? Pathology, two-dimensional. Genomics or omics, cellular or one-dimensional in some way,
Right.
right? So how do you connect the scale across that data set? How do you derive insights that are meaningful here, 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 to be able to fuse and optimize what the correct answer should be? At the same time, recognizing where what is needed. Do you need a transcriptomic profile for every patient? No, you don't. It's not going to add any value, right? That's
Right.
economic waste. So being able to identify that and filter that down on what is the most critical data that you need to bring precision across that workflow.
Yeah. And I think I just feel like it's important to like define like, where the limits, where are the different, sort of elements that you're considering. And the great thing is, and the one reason why you saw me look down just a second ago. So we just got a question in from Daniel Fox, and he's asking, are you applying diversity and demographics in your developed models?
It's a huge area for us, right? And it should be a huge area of focus for this industry. We've developed tools and diagnostics, and we can all acknowledge this without, it's just a shortcoming and things we didn't think about. We've developed tools and diagnostics on data that was readily available, patients that would easily be recruitable in clinical trials, and we've forgotten that for us to be successful, really make a dent in this disease, we have to think about diversity, both in the how do you develop these in a way that is that accounts for that diversity, and you're really thinking about the nuances, both biological as well as socioeconomic, that exist as we develop tools. And then how do you create technologies that you can solve for the racial disparity aspects? Well, you got to create more cost-effective tools so more people can afford it, more people can have access to it, and more people will have access to it from a location perspective. Not everybody can get care at MD Anderson. How do you level that playing field? So we do, we've partnered with we organizations like University of Chicago, University of Alabama, that have a very diverse population relative to the general population here, right? And really capturing that data and working on analysis to be able to and models that capture that behavior. In fact, we're going as far as University of Hawaii as one of our partners, who's really focused on understanding the Asian Pacific Islander population, right? And how that's different from the rest of the US. Because there are true differences that exist, and that will drive back to where you were going initially, is what's the right treatment for the patient. So unless you account for those biological differences, you can't solve for it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, who knows, maybe in the differences that we all have lies the answer, right? And that's the one sort of, burning question for me. And I tell everybody, look, I am not a life sciences in the lab grown scientist, right? So I am an outsider who is very interested in these conversations and, love every minute of it. But it makes the inquisitive PhD side of me trigger and just go, well, I have more questions. I have more questions.
Any good doctor in the cancer care space that you talk to will acknowledge that every patient is truly an N of one. And everything that we've been doing and from a research perspective, where the investment is going, is how do you better capture that uniqueness, or the fact that it's an N of one, so you can treat them truly as a unique entity, or a unique patient.
Yeah. So do you have any, I'll open it up to you in terms of how you would like to approach this. Do you have any innovative projects that you and your team are currently working on that you'd like to share here?
Yeah, lots. Look, there's the advantage of being truly digital is, we can do lots of innovative projects at scale, right? And a breadth of them at a very low cost. And the advantage of having a comprehensive solution, or the need for a comprehensive solution, is we have to do numerous things to be successful. I'll share the first product. Actually, is really, really exciting. You've been following the Dense Breast Initiative. What that's going to lead is, every patient who has a mammogram going forward will have breast density reported for them. Mm-hmm. Guess what? Almost 40 to 50% of women in the US over 40 have dense breasts. right? And if you have breast cancer, you can't fully comprehend what the extent of the disease, or if you have cancer, just using a normal mammogram. So you need to get MRIs to be able to better capture the extent of the disease. That's the workflow, or the guidelines in early stage breast cancer. Now, the challenge you're going to have is you're going to have this bolus of MRIs that are going to happen over, right? We all hear about this, the kind of the workload issue, and but MRIs, and that's going to lead to a pretty significant increase in cost of the U.S. healthcare system. MRIs, what we've found in the projects that we've done, are also, and not just MRIs, imaging like CT scans as well, are one of the most precious data sets and data to bring precision to a patient's workflow. And so a lot of the projects that we do around here is, what can we understand from images fused with what we know about a particular patient to be able to understand their disease broadly. So going back to the dosing conversation we were having, how does a drug get to a tumor? Well, you take, whether it's intravenously, you take a pill, it metabolizes in the body, but in order to get to the tumor, it gets through from the blood vessels that are in and around the tumor, going through the healthy tissue and penetrating at different levels into the cancer. So projects that we're doing here, and science that we're doing here, is really going after that vascularity and understanding, if you have a blood vessel here, what does that mean in terms of your drug delivery? If you have a blood vessel here, what does that mean in terms of the growth of the tumor? And what we've been able to show is capturing that type of information is very predictive, as you would expect, of response, very prognostic, as you expect of, does the patient end up having a recurrence, or does the patient having a metastatic disease, right? So that's brought more value to imaging, and starting to bring imaging to the forefront of precision medicine into that conversation, right? It's made, right? The other part of that tool is, how do you take just a visualization component, right? Images are great, but images are really not meant to be read by patients, right? That's why we have great radiologists and plenty of them. But images offer a really important tool for patients to be educated on their own disease and be really part of a shared decision-making framework. So taking that raw image and creating approaches for clinicians to be able to educate their patients and bring them along the journey of how their disease will be treated is a core part of our mission as well. Patient experience has to be part of every health system's AAA. And so we've been able to leverage that capability, that's kind of the base capability of what we do, towards an improved patient experience. And we're doing lots of innovative projects, working with patients to decide and determine what's the best way doctors should present them information that would make them feel informed, not afraid, and be part of an active conversation and an active part of their journey.
Yeah, given your idea in terms of examining, radiographic images, this that same concept, right? Whenever you get to the cellular level, and I'm just envisioning, like, for cervical cancer, right? So if you're screening for cervical cancer, you're gonna have lots of images leading up to most likely the person presenting with cancer, and then images potentially afterwards, right? And so again, I can just envision in my future brain that there might be a possibility of leveraging the platform for that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And and also going back to the thesis of cancers are heterogeneous, we're gonna run out of biomarkers the traditional way, which is, let's find the right set of genes, right? Or let's find the right structural signature that we see. And the reason we're going to do that, and the reason why, PD-L1, for example, if you're familiar with that for immunotherapy, is a great signature for some patients in terms of determining whether, but a horrible signature for certain patients.
Right.
Because that's strange. Because if you took a PD-L1 signature from this part of the tumor, 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 you're most likely going to get different answers.
Right.
And so, we work with lots of pharma companies now on kind of modeling these behaviors and, what correlates to something like a PD-L1 expression when it comes to the biophysical components of a cancer. And guess what? Biology and genomics is kind of, they're manifestations of each other. What happens in three-dimensional space is manifesting from what's happening from the underlying cells, and then what changes at the three-dimensional space may further impact the underlying cell. So you got to understand it both ways. So the work that we do with pharma companies, it allows us to capture that type of behavior and really bring a broad set of data together to be able to find better signatures or better biomarkers of response.
Yeah, um, my my curiosity for the future on biomarkers and um, cancer genes in particular is, just like we have now DNA and RNA, and we know how important the RNA actually is, in the overall, way that things behave. I sort of wonder if there isn't some other underlying thing that eventually we'll discover, with some of the tools and analysis that we have, where all of a sudden we could say, hey, there is a broader scope to this. But, I think, there's so much exploration and so many great tools that I feel like everybody's working on, that should help to uncover this, where all of a sudden somebody just, starts to take the lead, very clearly, because of the fact that they're looking for the things that that maybe they weren't looking for before.
And a lot of great science has been done already, right? So the way we explain what we do here is bringing the best of science together with the best of technology, and that science is not always ours, right? We're paying homage to people that have done wonderful science and created findings, but now translating to how do you apply that to really impact a patient.
Right. Yeah, no, so it's very true. So what are some of the most challenging projects that you've worked on at Symbiosys, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, it's the space well, right? Life sciences, there is a commercial challenges. Let's start from the beginning. There's scientific challenges, there's clinical challenges, there's regulatory challenges, and there's commercial challenges. So you're solving for a variety of challenges in life science that you typically might not have to solve for in any other industry, right? So for
Right.
us, a lot of the challenges was, okay, we're building novel solutions, that, for instance, the FDA has never seen. And so how do you engage the FDA? How do you create a modular, thoughtful strategy that allows you to bring products to market, fulfill the mission of the company in an iterative manner rather than going after just the holy grail?
Yeah.
So, you know, so those are some of the projects that we continue to work on. These are always ongoing, evolving projects that we do here, right? We've been very blessed as an organization to have wonderful partners around the table. The best in class from Mayo Clinic, the best in class from UCLA, the best in class from UNC, working with us and solving for these problems, both clinically, how do we validate it, thoughtfully, how do you create modules of what we have as a platform that drive the impact on patients that we want to have at the step that we want to have. Right. So a lot of those type of projects have, has been my focus as CEO. I'm not the PhD in the room, right? So that is my focus: is how do we take the great work that the team here is doing, and how do we really start to bring it to market in a thoughtful, sound manner?
Yeah. No, I do feel like this industry has many more challenges and people that have to be patient enough to sort of wait for the answer, for the science to prove out the answers, versus, we go develop some great tech product and tomorrow it can be in somebody's hand and don't have to do all the qualifications that we have to do. And, there's a lot of disadvantages, but on the back end, there's sort of this ramp up in positivity that I also would have, as well, especially whenever you have family members or people that you even are connected to that, are afflicted by some of these diseases, and hey, we're creating options and pathways for them. So that's great. So what's the greatest leadership advice that you've ever received?
And I have tons of mentors, and I get a lot of advice that I internalize and try to enact on. Right. I think the one that I live and die by is make your decisions with your people in mind.
Mm.
Right. And I really feel that, right? Because you can't be a good manager by reading a management 101 book. You just can't. It doesn't work. Or going to school to be a manager.
Right.
You become
you
a
can't
manager.
Study this.
As we bring and as we elevate our team to management roles and leadership roles here, we educate them with the same message, right? You can learn the tactical components of it. How do you do performance reviews? How do you do this and how do you do that? But the core that you need to align with is if you have the best interests of the people that work for you at heart.
Yeah.
Right. And you make decisions for them or make decisions for an organization with that orientation, more often than not, you won't be wrong. You
Hmm.
know, um,
Right.
and that's something that applies to other facets of life, not just in leadership, right? Is uh, or in other areas, not just life sciences, but that really stuck with me. It stuck with me my entire career.
Yeah, it's so important, and also I thought I would mention too that the um, you've got quite a bit of love on LinkedIn as well from Grigory Pekarsky saying that you're the best. Daniel Fox earlier said that you're one of the greatest leaders in precision medicine. So
Yeah.
you're getting a lot of love over there as well. I just thought I would mention that
We're
too.
very, like I said, I use the term blessed a lot. We're very blessed to have really good people around us and rooting for us, right? Who wouldn't? And that's true for most
Yeah,
companies in the space, right? We all want all of us to win.
that's
So
right.
all of us,
Yeah.
we, our friends, our families can have a better future. But grateful. Thank you.
Excellent. So what inspires you?
A lot, a lot. Look, it's very, very easy. We're both you and I are in positions where it's very easy to find inspiration in what we do. You know, the interaction with patients that we have, the interactions with doctors that we have, and their desire to do better and look for better solutions is absolutely an inspiration, right? How can it not be? You know,
Mm,
the story of survivors, and what they had to do and what they had to overcome. You know, now we're in a much better place with cancer care, but think about survivors from the earlier days, and I've had the opportunity to interact with them, and they used to tell us they tell us about how it used to be, and we're trying to bring these new solutions to market, and that's a really true inspiration for me. We use the term, for this year specifically for Symbiosis, we use the word fulfillment,
mm,
because when you're in the lab and you've been building enabling technologies that really haven't touched a patient yet, you don't know the true value or the inspiration behind why you do all that hard work that you do until you start impacting patients. You start hearing from patients, this would have been transformative in my journey, this was incredibly valuable. You start hearing that. So that's a big inspiration for me emotionally, right? This is a cancer's a is close to my heart, given my mother's diagnosis and her journey. um, but also innovation.
yeah.
I'm always excited about, and the team here as well, excited about doing things differently, not just always following the norm, thinking outside the box. And if you have people around you that interact in that manner and that live and die by that philosophy, you're always inspired.
Mhm. Absolutely. What concerns you?
You're asking some tough questions today. We could go macro and talk about where the state of the world, but at a macro scale, everything that's going on in the world has to concern all of us.
Mm,
It cannot affect us, right? You kind of see
yeah.
what's happening across the pond. You see what's happening here, but more specifically, I think the racial disparities or the socioeconomic disparities and the challenge of access that exist in healthcare today, even in the United States, right? I grew up in Africa, and I hear that, and you almost unfortunately expect that there, but there's a component of access and disparity that exists here, in the first world, that
Mm,
is hard to comprehend,
yeah.
really hard to comprehend, right? The financial conditions, the market conditions, especially in the startup world, from a investment perspective, is worrisome, because that's going to thwart the future of innovation in a, in a,
Right.
in a, in a, in a manner that's going to be hard to recover from as we go forward in the future. So
Yeah, there are a lot of companies right now making critical decisions whether or not they can even continue. I know I talked to. It was interesting. Post bio a couple weeks ago. I talked to a CEO who has a second job at Amazon, trying to just cover the basics for his family while he sort of waits through kind of what to do with his company. So I mean, there are people making critical moves in terms of what to do without the funding that they have, and the challenge, obviously, as you bring up, right? Then what happens a few years from now whenever we turn around for that next generation of cancer drugs and they're not there, because they all sort of died in the valley of death somewhere.
Yeah.
It's a really tough time, and I know a lot of people are asking tough questions right now as well.
Yeah, more specifically in our space, and we kind of feel, I mentioned when we started the conversation, this is the second time I feel like in my career I'm at the right place at the right time, right? You look at two big trends. One is around screening. There has been a lot of innovation in screening, both from a liquid perspective, from blood, as well as from an imaging standpoint. And the question becomes, what is that going to lead to, right?
Right.
What's the outcome that thesis plays out? Well, you're going to have a lot of early stage cancer patients. It's great
Mm.
from an outcome perspective, but can the early stage cancer patients are treated very differently and much broadly and comprehensively, going back to the surgical aspect I was talking about, the timing of treatment, than a late stage. And do we have the right infrastructure and the support system and the right tools to be able to support our cancer care team and the workload that will create on health systems? And we find ourselves in a position to be able to solve for that concern.
Hmm.
The other is, there's a lot of investment you might have been following now in drug discovery itself. So how
Sure.
do you find, with AI, how do you find new targets? And we hope that for all our sake, that thesis plays out and we find the next generation drugs. The challenge you're going to have, and the blessing that we have, is cancer is not increasing at that rapid a pace. So you're going to have a ton of drug targets. You're not going to have enough patients to test on. So you've done all this innovation, and how do you know what's going to work or not? And everybody's going to be in line to see what's going to work, and how are you going to make those decisions? And that's another area. And that's why there's a duality to what we're doing at Symbiosys to address that. Is there's the whole concept of building a virtual tumor, testing that with a variety of targets, allows us to overcome that and bring some precision to that aspect of it as well. So we are in this space specifically. We are responding as much as we can to kind of those two writings on the wall that we're seeing there.
Excellent. What excites you?
Innovation all day. Innovation, problems, and solutions to those problems are incredibly exciting for me. And this is a tough space. Wins are hard to come by because they're tough. The science is tough, right? And the journey towards kind of incremental progress is very exciting to see and be at the front line of.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tushar, thank you so much for being on the Life Science Success podcast, and thank you for being here and telling us about Symbiosys and all the work that you're doing. I look forward to hearing more about how the evolution continues, especially given all the things that you're currently working on. And I really appreciate you sharing your story with me.
Likewise, Don. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it, and last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.